Get cool stuff for what you were going to do anyway. Drink beer. With Buy Beer, Get Gear from Labatt, you can just snap a photo of your receipt and upload it to the website to rack up points for exclusive merch. Get points for every purchase, whether you're grabbing a pint on draft, a case for a party, or a tall boy at the stadium. Any size, any product, anywhere you buy Labatt. Buy beer, get gear. Sign up now at rewards.labattusa.com.
Video.
Hey, Dabo Sweeney, congrats. I got you in, baby.
This is entertainment. People pay to watch this.
Pass to a cutting Hiltz. He darts in. He scores!
People actually subscribe.
All across central New York.
Time expired! Syracuse has done it!
It's Drive Time with your host, Tim Leonard.
Hey, guess what? I'm getting wide. Hey!
We welcome you into Drive Time on a Wednesday, ahead of the Friday game for the Orange football team. Colgate in town, our neighbors from Hamilton, in need of just an easy win as Syracuse football. They should be able to get it on Friday. We're continuing to count you down to that one. Continuing to talk all things SU football, everything that is on your mind right now in regards to the football team. We're trying to make sense of what happened over the weekend. The come-from-behind crazy win for the Orange over UConn. And we welcome your phone calls. 315-437-7644 is the phone number to call. Again, that's 315-437-7644. So, welcome on in to Drive Time. We will be chatting with Adam Terry in our next segment. Get his thoughts on what happened in that crazy game inside the Dome on Saturday. Adam will be our guest and one of our weekly guests here on Drive Time going forward. He was at the game, calling the game with Matt Park on the Syracuse Sports Network Learfield broadcast. Get on in the Q Sports Talk chat as well. We'll take your comments on the Q Sports Talk chat, Q Sports Talk YouTube as well. We're always simulcasting. You can always watch the show, no breaks, on our Twitch stream and our YouTube page. We begin the show today, though, and before we get to Adam and discuss the offensive line with Adam, because he's a former Q's great offensive lineman, former NFL offensive lineman, I do want to get his thoughts on what he has made of the offensive line at this point. That seems to be the biggest topic with the team right now. And the biggest concern around Syracuse football right now is the offensive line. So I figured I'd dive into the stats, because if you've listened to the show once, you probably gathered that I'm big on stats. And I'm going to try and decipher what the stats are telling us right now about just how effective, just how ineffective Syracuse has been in the trenches, pass blocking, run blocking, and what to make of, was it Steve Angeli holding on to the football too long? Was it Steve Angeli not making good decisions against UConn, or was it the offensive line that really was the root of the problem? So we dove into the stats, and we'll try and figure out together what was the root of the problem against UConn and just in general in the first 2 weeks of the year. How concerned should we be about the Orange's big uglies, the offensive line, to this point? So let's see what the numbers have gotten to at this point. And just to clarify, Gio out there, just hit that solo button. You'll be able to hear me. I think something's probably soloed out there. So we got that taken care of. Let's dive into our numbers, though, from the offensive line to this point. And the most concerning number I came across, there's a stat on College Football Data, which is a website that has all kinds of advanced stats for college football. And the most concerning stat I saw is they grade out offensive line yards, which is basically how effective has your offensive line been at getting a push in the interior, and how effective overall has the offensive line been. Syracuse right now is second to last in Power 4 football and last in the ACC in offensive line yards through 2 games this season. Last year, the Orange started out pretty weak on the offensive line. I think it's important to remember that. there were times through the first 3-4 games of last season that we were really worried about the Orange's offensive line. You think back to the Stanford game, Holy Cross was actually kind of concerning, even though it was the FCS opponent like this week. That was week 4. Remember, they really didn't do a great job at protecting Kyle McCord against Holy Cross even, and there were major concerns. Then it felt like towards the second half of the year, and we can get into this with Adam some, it did feel like they made some significant improvements on figuring out what's the right 5 for the offensive line, what's the right makeup overall for just our identity in terms of what we want to do inside the offensive line. Dale Williams improved the bodies that they had. Remember, they had big bodies last year like a Savion Washington, but Savion Washington became a much better pass blocker, run blocker as the season progressed. So right now, the stats aren't good in terms of offensive line yards. This one metric on college football data. They were 12th in the ACC in this stat last year. They are currently last in terms of offensive line yards in the conference in this stat. But it does give me confidence that it's still early, and this is a young offensive line, and Dale Williams, I believe, is a good offensive line coach, and I believe they have the right bodies. They have talented bodies in there. And also, we've talked about this. It feels like they're just mis-IDing some blitzes, and the communication overall has not been good on the offensive line. There are a couple times where Angeli just has no option but to get sacked or throw it away very quickly because a free rusher is coming right at him. And even though Syracuse seemingly had enough bodies to block him, they're not putting the right bodies in the right places to make sure that a free rusher isn't coming right at the quarterback. And Fran Brown has talked about that, how in a way it's not that worrisome that the offensive line is allowing the quarterback to get sacked as much as they are, because it's not like that's just happening because they're losing one-on-one battles consistently. A lot of it is disguising and things like that have led to Syracuse not picking up the blitzers or not knowing where to block and where to find the blitzers. And that is still a whole nother issue that they need to figure out. But it feels like it's not entirely the personnel just being overwhelmed on the offensive line. The one thing that is really interesting in UConn's approach against the Orange last year and in UConn's approach against the Orange this year, they were incredibly blitz heavy against Syracuse. If it felt like as you were watching the game on Saturday that, man, UConn keeps blitzing, the stats definitely back that up. UConn blitzed 58% of the time against the Orange. An average amount, we talked about this on the show last week, an average amount is 35% for a college team in terms of how often they are blitzing. We talked about how Syracuse blitzed an out-of-the-ordinary amount in week 1 against Tennessee, even though that didn't really match up with what a lot of eyes and what a lot of people gathered from watching the game. Now, there's a difference in the way you blitz and the type of blitzes, and obviously one blitz can be not as heavy as another blitz. I get all that. Still, 58% of the time is 58% of the time. That is way more than the average of 35%. So UConn was very blitz heavy. Now, they were blitz heavy against Kyle McCord last year as well and did a pretty good job against Kyle McCord in terms of getting to him. But McCord threw for 470 yards. Steve Angeli ended up throwing for 417 yards against UConn. Last year, UConn blitzed 53% of the time against the Orange. Now, the key stat really is how often is the quarterback getting pressured? What percentage of his dropbacks is he under pressure? And that's a stat that PFF tracks, Pro Football Focus. And I went and did a lot of digging on basically how Steve Angeli has been in that stat, how often that he has been pressured compared to Kyle McCord last year, compared to Garrett Schrader in 2023. And then I did go back to Tommy DeVito in 2019 because that's a year that stands out to all of us, I'm sure, as being a year where the offensive line was not good and it felt like DeVito was pressured too much. And some of that, you can still rehash that and think, was that Tommy DeVito holding on to the ball too much? How much of it was the offensive line? But as we've seen, Tommy DeVito was successful at Illinois. He's now an NFL quarterback. When he's given time, he was a pretty effective quarterback. he did not have a great offensive line in front of him. There's no denying that. I don't think it was all on the offensive line in 2019 or in some of the down years of the Tommy DeVito experience, but his offensive line was not good. So it's interesting to compare the numbers of what we have through 2 weeks to that season, to last year, and so on and so forth. So let's get into it. We mentioned the blitzing is high, and teams are blitzing Syracuse more than normal. 51% of the time through 2 games, Steve Angeli has been blitzed. The average in college football is 35%. The key stat of how often you're being pressured, Angeli has been pressured on 36% of his dropbacks through 2 games. That is the 4th most among quarterbacks in the ACC right now. That's the 25th most in the country this season. Kyle McCord, for reference, was pressured on 27% of his dropbacks last season. So Angeli, 36% through 2 games this year, dealing with a lot more blitzing. McCord last year was blitzed 43% of the time. Angeli was blitzed 58% of the time by UConn, 51% of the time overall. So an uptick in how much the Orange are seeing blitzes this year through 2 games, but also a pretty substantial uptick in how often the quarterback is being pressured. From 27% last year, which was 74th most in the country. So think about it that way. You want to be as low as possible in that stat. That's not a bad number, really. Syracuse was doing a fairly good job at keeping Kyle McCord away from being pressured. Now, some of that is Kyle McCord was really good at getting the ball out very quickly, and that all ties into the stat. But McCord blitzed 43% of the time last year, pressured 27%. Angeli has been blitzed 51%, pressured 36%. So how does that compare to when we didn't feel good about the offensive line, or when Syracuse has had seasons where you look back and you think the offensive line was the Achilles heel for the team? They didn't pan out quite as good as we thought because of the offensive line. 2023, they had Garrett Schrader as their quarterback, the last year of the Dino era, when they did make a bowl game, but it was a pretty underwhelming season in the grand scheme of things. Garrett Schrader was under pressure 32% of the time. Again, the number to remember here is Steve Angeli has been pressured 36% of the time through 2 games. And in this past game, he was pressured 38% of the time because of UConn blitzing a very abnormal amount. So Schrader 32% of the time in 2023. Tommy DeVito in 2019, that was the year that Syracuse went in with high expectations, fresh off the 10-win season. Now Dino's got his guys. They're preseason top 25. They won 5 games that year. Very underwhelming. DeVito did not live up to the hype and did not play as good as what we saw from Tommy DeVito in 2018 when they did have a good offensive line, when he was in that relief role and came in and contributed to the Orange's 10-win season. 36% of the time in 2019, Tommy DeVito was under pressure. He was blitzed 40% of the time, according to Pro Football Focus. So right now, what stands out is Syracuse is getting blitzed a lot. Now, some of that is really just the UConn game. It wasn't abnormal how much Tennessee blitzed them. Tennessee got home and got to the quarterback a good amount, which you kind of expect. That's an SEC defense. UConn blitzed a ton. They have a reputation for blitzing a lot. But the question really, and the biggest takeaway here is, if you are a defensive coordinator at Clemson, if you're a defensive coordinator at SMU, at Duke, some of these opponents in the future, how much are you going to blitz Syracuse? And are you going to watch the UConn game film and say, wow, UConn was doing a whole lot of different stuff in terms of disguising and trying to mess with the different fronts and looks that they were giving Steve Angeli, and man, Syracuse mis-ID'd some of those, and yeah, they blitz 58% of the time, which is kind of risky, and that's sort of what UConn does, so we don't have to blitz maybe quite as much as that, but the average is 35%. Maybe we will see this trend continue of a lot of teams blitzing Syracuse. I just wonder right now, I don't know if there's a strong feeling one way or the other, because this is what UConn did last year. And I remember talking to Kyle McCord about this last year, and he was saying that when you watched UConn on film, they were as tough to figure out as any of the defenses that he played last year, basically, because they did a whole lot of different stuff in terms of the looks they gave him, the fronts, the disguising, things like that. So UConn may have been a good matchup in terms of exposing what is the weakness of the offensive line right now, in my opinion, that Syracuse is not communicating and not IDing where these blitzers are coming from. And therefore, Steve Angeli is seeing too much pressure right now. 36% of the time he drops back, he's under pressure. That's a figure that needs to come down because that's what the figure was in 2019 when Tommy DeVito was the quarterback and we felt like the offensive line was the biggest issue with the team, and DeVito didn't help necessarily, and I think Angeli will get the ball out quicker than Tommy DeVito that year. But that's what I glean from these numbers right now. I also do feel like it's early, and the offensive line last year didn't look good at the numbers through 3 or 4 weeks. I think they're going to get better. I think there's good coaches on this staff. I think Dale Williams is one of them. And this young offensive line is only going to get better. Travion Mack being out doesn't help. He was a starting tackle week 1. They didn't have him week 2. He was on a scooter. We don't know how much longer he will be on that scooter, and we don't know when he'll return to the football field. But that's kind of the takeaway right now for me is I'm really going to be focused on going forward. Our team's going to be blitz heavy against the Orange. Because in theory, Steve Angeli, I think everything we know about him, he's a great processor. He's really good operationally, is what Fran has said. And just the style in which he plays, he's a really smart quarterback. He watches a ton of film. It's some of the same characteristics that Kyle McCord had. The hope really, like we said all year, is he can be Kyle McCord light. And I think as the season progressed last year, teams realized we got to scale it back on how much we're blitzing Kyle McCord. And that's why the number ended up more in the 40%, low 40% range in terms of how much blitzing Syracuse was facing. Right now, it's 51% of the time teams are blitzing Syracuse. And when I say teams, that's Tennessee and UConn. We've only played 2 games, so it's a small sample size, and we'll see if that continues. We'll talk about this some more with Adam Terry as we return. Former offensive lineman can give us his thoughts on the Cuse O-line to this point, what he has made of how the season has started. We will chat with Adam on the other side here. You're listening to Drive Time on ESPN Radio and QSportsTalk.com.
Burdick Toyota.
What's up, chat? I gotta figure out my chat. It looks all wonky right now. Hang on. Get it on the laptop. Oh, there we go. Yes, Jen, it does seem like we have big boys. Can we get the big boys to block a little better? Like Byron Washington, perfect example. He's what we have right now, which is a mountain of a human that is young and got to figure out how we can get him going. I would love to make it 4-6 in a perfect world, but that's not up to me. So I appreciate you guys listening, but the more you listen, maybe the more that I'll have leverage to say, hey, let's do 4-6. I understand it's a little wonky having just an hour, but that's what they gave me, and can't be too disappointed that they gave me an hour. I mean, it's up to just Galaxy Media, so I appreciate you guys, but I don't know if emailing will do much. Really, I gotta prove people are listening and grow this thing before we can start talking about stretching it out more, probably. But if you can't catch the show while you're driving home, we've always got the podcast, and that's kind of the whole point of this is it's an hour show every day, so that's a nice consumable podcast on your commute the next day maybe, or however you want to listen. Oh no, Ryan. Golfing pain is the worst. I've dealt with years where I've had bad back injuries golfing, and there's nothing worse than that. Hope your knee's all good. Yeah, I've never gotten a knee from golf, but really, even though people mock golfers for not being athletes and all that, you can get injured doing it, and then it's a tough thing to do when you're feeling a little tweak somewhere. So don't push it too much, for sure. Who's going to the game Friday? I guess the better question is who's going to Shaughnessy's beforehand or the quad to listen to me on the Learfield broadcast with our next guest, Mr. Adam Terry. Yeah, definitely get that checked, Ryan. Better safe than sorry.
ESPN 97.7 and 100.1. Watch live on QSportsTalk.com.
We're rolling along with Drive Time, 5 to 6 p.m. every weeknight. Always can watch back the show on our Q Sports Talk Twitch stream, YouTube page. Podcast goes out immediately following the end of the show. Tim Leonard with you for our new venture, second week of the new show. So keep us in mind if you're driving around right now. And we've only had a couple guests on the show so far, but here's a guy that we are going to have on the program every single week going forward, and that is one Adam Terry. He's going to be sick of talking to me by the amount that we will be talking here in football season. Adam is a part of the Syracuse Sports Network Learfield broadcast team, so whenever you're listening to the games on the radio on TK99, he is the voice that you hear on those airwaves with Matt Park, the voice that you hear with me on the pregame and postgame show. And Adam and I are going to be chatting quite a bit because we'll be out there on the quad Friday ahead of the game that gets going at 7 p.m. against Colgate. And I got a chance to catch up with him earlier today. So because he's a busy guy, he's coaching his son's team. He's doing a whole lot of different things. So Adam not available during the actual drive time window, so we couldn't do it live, but we chatted with him earlier today, and we're going to play back that conversation right now with one Adam Terry. It's time for our weekly segment with Adam Terry, who is the Learfield radio color analyst and was on the call for the game against UConn this past Saturday. And Adam, you've been out this for a little bit now. You've seen some crazy games, naturally, being around Syracuse. Where does that one rank in terms of comebacks that you maybe didn't see coming? It just felt like it came out of thin air there, but the guys got it done and a huge come-from-behind win.
Yeah, for Syracuse coming out, I think the biggest thing is you saw it against Tennessee, you saw it against UConn, is that the ability to kind of start to string things together in the second half. So, not getting out early, not jumping out early has hurt them in the last two games. And from my perspective, when I looked at it pregame, a close game was something that I saw going in UConn's favor. But you got to love the grit that starts at the top, works its way down. And if this is the character of the team, I like it. Now, that's also saying that there's a lot of things that need to be cleaned up. But, you come out of this, you easily could have been 0-2, with a loss that you really, you look at the schedule and you're like, okay, Syracuse's Jimmy's and Joe's are better than UConn's. And when I looked at it, I was like, it could be a battle. But for the most part, you come out with a victory. A lot of discussion about the Syracuse team on media and from analysts all over the board. But just love the grit, love the personality, and it starts from the top.
Yeah, obviously some of that discussion was the wind sprints and Fran Brown going to that tactic like he's Herb Brooks after the game. What did you make, as a player, what do you make of, or a former player, of Fran going to that tactic? And I don't know, just the discussion around it, it seems to be mixed. It seems like some coaches are all for it. They like the old school mindset. Some coaches think it was performative. It was optics based. What did you make of seeing that right after the game for the first time? I
saw that there are certain segments that were like, man, I just love this. The guys that are beating their chest, played in the 80s and 90s. They're like, I love this. That's what it's about, holding people accountable. I've seen the different people. Greg Olson was called a performative and things of that nature. But when you look at it, whether I'm for or against it, the guys did it, right? So when you look to the field, it wasn't like anybody was just standing there. Now, the speed of which they did it, that's a different story. But what I found, because that's an easy thing that guys can, just start getting pissed off about and not really wanting to do things going forward. So I had all of my miracle quotes, I was going to get my whistle out. I was ready to do it. And, it catches you off guard, but it is something that is of the personality. And it seems as though from discussion and from interviews, it was something that was put in place prior to the game. Now, I might be wrong with that, but that's what it seemed like in a couple of the statements made by Fran.
Yeah, I think he's stayed true to that throughout the week, that he said if it doesn't look a certain way, then he told the guys they're going to run, and they did run after the game, despite it being a win over UConn. Adam Terry is with us, the Learfield color analyst on the Syracuse Sports Network, calls all the games with Matt Park. And we talked throughout our post-game show about how this is just another example of Fran getting a come-from-behind win, kind of out of nowhere. You think back to last year, the Miami game, they're down 21-0. Win probability had that at about a 4% chance of a victory for the Orange. They come from behind. Virginia Tech, which was following the tough Pittsburgh loss, they're down 21-3. They come back. What does that say about the culture? And we keep saying the culture Fran is building, but it feels like the culture's kind of been built at this point based on some of these outcomes. And just hearing Dan Villari after the game, he even said 2, 3, 4 years ago, I don't think we come back and win this game like they did against UConn.
Well, I'm gonna be a major salesperson for Fran's reliance of DART, right? Detailed, accountable, relentless, and tough. Now, relentless and tough, the R and the T within that, I think you're starting to see, right? Like the detailed and accountable, the accountability probably goes into the realm of the running the sprints at the end. But if we get the detailed aspect of it, pre-snap penalties, missing from up in the booth, which looks like missing in some pass protections, and Jelly getting hit too much on the defensive side of the ball, just getting everything dialed in. I like the mentality that they're playing with, but there are the biggest detailed aspects of playing football is alignment, assignment, and technique. You got to have all three of those in order to be proficient in your game plan and execute at a high level. Now, the accountability, that starts with the top down, and I'm fairly sure with my interactions with Fran, that's going to be there. And then relentless and tough is that back-end portion that you continually see out of a Fran Brown-led football team.
You mentioned maybe mis-IDing in the pass protection a little bit, and we've heard Fran use the word bust a lot in terms of what is happening when the offensive line is missing a free rusher. There was a fourth down play in the first half that led to a fumble where basically a rusher just had a free line at Steve Angeli. And I think that's what everyone is worried about naturally right now is the offensive line, which went up against the UConn defensive line that we thought they would be able to handle, and they didn't do a great job at IDing or communication. Is it that? Is it just mis-IDing stuff? And does that give you optimism that if they do clean up procedurally a little bit, it's not so much missing one-on-one battles, it's not identifying the blitzes that are coming? Or what are you seeing from up in the booth in terms of what the flaws are right now with the O-line?
Well, without a script, right, and without a headset, understanding and knowing what the plays are, it's difficult. You start to see some of it happen over the past 2 weeks. But at the end of the day, it's cleaning it up, right, and taking unnecessary hits off of the quarterback. When the quarterback feels secure and sound, or just knows he's going to be able to, he sees the blitz, he knows that there's only one guy rushing at him opposed to somebody leaking off and potentially hitting him, and being able to drive in there and staring down the sight to the barrel. Those are things that you want to see out of the quarterback, and when protection goes well, you're starting to see that he can make most of the throws, right? And there's a further litmus test that needs to be occurring throughout the course of the season. But at the end of the day, you got to keep your quarterback on his feet, and it has not been going as well as they expected. Now you revert back to last year, and I think some similar stuff, right? New guys trying to mesh, players that were at other schools plugging into key positions, and then over the course of the year, right? Like I looked at a guy like Savion Washington last year, from where he started to where he finished, he had the opportunity to get in the NFL, right? Like at the beginning of the year, I was like, wow, that's a large human with decent feet, and he should be playing better than the way that he did. But then the maturation, the understanding of the offense allowed him to now catapult himself into the eyes of scouts and the NFL prospects. I see that through the guidance of a guy like Dale Williams, he's long in the tooth. He's been around football a long, long time. And every day that they go in there, the way that he's coaching them, they're going to get better, or they're going to replace that person who can't meet the expectation of what that offensive line is supposed to do.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I do feel like last year the panic button was pushed around this time with the offensive line. And yes, you had Kyle McCord who got the ball out quickly, but they seemed to get better and better as the season progressed. And that's something I've been trying to get across to the listeners this week is we knew this was a young team going in. The other thing that I think gives you confidence that this young team will grow is Syracuse has a very good coaching staff around Fran Brown as well. And a lot of these assistant coaches were some of the best assistant coaches at their previous stops, and now they're here at Syracuse. So you bring up Dale Williams, but just the other guys that are helping out with the young linebackers or the young defensive linemen, like a Nick Williams. I mean, does that give you optimism that we will see strides? And we saw a lot of those strides last year with the team that was kind of trying to figure out some new pieces. They got better and better as the season progressed. I mean, I think back on that Cal game last year as the game where it was like a different offensive line from what we saw in the first half of the season.
Hands down, and the development over a period of time, look, there are reasons within the transfer portal that people leave. Most of the time, especially in offensive line position, it's not because of NIL deals. It's because of maybe playing time or scheme or fit, however those look. So when guys come over, you might be taking a guy that's been in a system for 3 to 4 years, called it a certain way, do it a certain way, and then, when everything's flying, sometimes you revert to old things, and if it doesn't jive, it doesn't jive. But you like the coaching staff. Everybody that's in it is in it for the best interest of the university and the kids. So it is going to be a season in which there are going to be a multitude of ups and downs, right? You're going to start the gauntlet next week when you go down to Death Valley and you're going against Clemson, live bullets, right? Loud atmosphere. And then we'll really start to see where they go within this national landscape. Last year, you had a quarterback in Kyle McCord who was a proven commodity and had just gotten run out of town for someone else. And for Syracuse, he was able to meld with a bunch of veteran players, Aronde Gadsden, LaQuinn Allen, Marlowe. Like, you just can name 6 to 7, 8 guys that are no longer here that were a big thing. So the development of younger talent is going to take time, especially if you look at Antoine Delorier, just for an example. Last two games ago, he was starting in high school. Fantastic, right? We got a long way to go from Marlowe Wax to Antoine Delorier, right? And that's not a knock on Delorier. He's young, right? You got a long way to go in order to become a player that is currently on an NFL roster.
Yeah, I mean, and he's making the pass breakup at the end of the game in his second game of his college career as a true freshman. Demetrius Samuel is up against Skylar Bell in some situations, and he should be a high school senior right now. He's 17 years old. That's something Fran said in his press conference this week. Well, Adam, we'll leave you with this. What do you want to see against Colgate this week, knowing that it should be an easy win? Is there anything in particular, like get the ground game going a little bit more, or anything that stands out that you would like to see them check that box and make you feel a little bit more confident in what they have going into Clemson?
The biggest thing for me is, that detailed aspect, the alignment, the assignment, and technique. Pre-snap penalties occurring because people don't know where to line up, or people are being covered up on the offensive side of the ball. Just really sound in the back end defensively, not seeing pre-runners go deep. It is one where the pre-snap, sideline interaction, where everybody's on the same page, you're not running personnel out late, that just gets really dialed in against a Colgate, because your X's and O's should beat up on a team like Colgate, even though, you love what Coach Fitzpatrick was able to do at Cortland, and now parlay that up to Colgate and see what he can do there. But Syracuse, where they want to go and who they want to be, need to be completely dialed in, and there are no fire drills or, a guy running in late, a guy doing this. Like, everybody within that place, if there's 0 fans in there, everybody knows that they're doing the right thing, they're in the right spot, it's the right call, and they're dialed in. That's the thing that I want to see the most, because guys are playing hard. They've got to clean up on tackles once again, but it's also the pre-snap stuff, the alignment, the assignment, and the technique. And once they do that, then you can start to work forward and say, okay, this is what we could project into, because it is really hard, really fast.
Yeah. All right. He is Adam Terry. We'll chat with you on the quad ahead of the Friday night game against Colgate on the Learfield broadcast, and we'll be chatting with you every single week here on Drive Time. Appreciate the time, Adam.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, there is Adam Terry. Always great to chat with Adam. Our phone lines will be open the rest of the show today, 315-437-7644. If you have thoughts on the offensive line, the team as a whole, we welcome your phone calls the rest of the show today. We'll hit a timeout here on Drive Time on ESPN Radio and QSportsTalk.com.
Did you miss Drive Time?
Yeah, no injuries Friday would be very, very nice. Just got to get out of this one healthy. Of course, curious to see. We could talk about this tomorrow, maybe. How much are we going to see Ricky Collins? But, just got to clean up some things. Like Adam said, I want to see them just have better, clean substitutions. Don't have anything that's delay of game or procedural stuff. Got to get through a week without doing that and feel a little bit more confident in your operation. Deloria has been very solid. He had the best PFF grade on the team this past week. I can't get over how big he is. When you're down on the sideline before, it's like hard to fathom how jacked he is. And then you remember he's an 18-year-old kid too. Like, he could be a bodybuilder. You talking about like getting out of the car and running around? I remember those, Tronic. At a stoplight. Yeah, that was incredibly scary watching that video. Not been a great, and then the school shooting as well. A lot of wild stuff today, sadly. My clock management was like late Dino Babers era here. Gotta get back on time. Yep. Glad we have sports. I thought it was fake the first time I saw that video. I mean, that's one of the crazier videos I've ever seen. That is true with the play calling, Tronic. I mean, they are going to get pressure. Steve Angeli's going to get pressured more naturally the more dropbacks there are. And he's leading the country basically in pass attempts at this rate. I mean, threw over 50 times against UConn. The Charlie Kirk video, if you haven't seen it. I don't know, is there any update on how he's doing? I mean, okay, he's dead, yeah. Did not look good. Yeah, don't watch it. Welcome back into Drive Time with Tim Leonard. Newish show, second week of the show. And we do have the phone lines ringing here at 315-437-7644. If you have thoughts, we can still work in on the program tonight. 315-437-7644 is the phone number to call. So we'll get to some of you that are calling in right now shortly. Do want to talk a little bit about Fran Brown and what he was doing on the recruiting trail last night. Another big night on the recruiting trail for Fran. Picked up 2 athletes, 2 more track stars. The guy loves his track stars. He's always looking for a guy who is quick, athletic, and guys specifically at the defensive back position he seems to have a good eye out for, and it seems like two athletes that might be playing defensive back are going to be coming to Syracuse in the 2027 class if all holds based on what happened last night. So good to see the early returns in the 2027 recruiting class. We're all getting old that there is a 2027 recruiting class, but the early returns have been very positive. Syracuse right now has the fourth best recruiting class in the country in 2027, and Tristan Hughes, who is expected to play defensive back, an athlete out of Ohio, committed to the Orange last night, as well as Davion Cromartie, who was a Florida track star athlete. He had some good offers: Appalachian State, Illinois, Georgia Tech, Maryland, Pitt, Wake Forest. Also unofficially visited Florida State as well. So seems like Fran Brown is doing Fran Brown things on the recruiting trail, and that was the thing that really held back Dino Babers. He didn't ever elevate the recruiting even after the 10-win season. We will go to the phone lines right now, though, and if you have thoughts on anything happening Syracuse related, you can call in at 315-437-7644. Let's check in with Mark in New York City, who's always listening and one of our loyal callers. What's on your mind today, Mark?
Hey, Tim. How you doing? Great show as always. Wanted to bring up on the defensive side of the ball. I think we've had 0 interceptions through 2 games. So, I know there's been a couple fumble recoveries, but we haven't made any interceptions. Last year as a team, we had 11 interceptions, so that averages to about 1 a game. So far, we have 0 through 2 games. How much is that a concern for you, or how much do you equate that to that the 2 quarterbacks we've faced so far are essentially 2 24-year-olds? I think Joey Aguilar was like a 5th or 6th year senior, and the UConn quarterback is the same thing, about 24 years old. So how much do you equate to the seniority of the quarterbacks and their experience, or do you think that's a real concern right now for the team?
I'm a little concerned by it, Mark, just because last year they didn't get a ton of interceptions like you mentioned. They had 16 total turnovers last year, so playing in 13 games, little more than 1 per game. That ranks them kind of middle of the pack in the country. You forced 1 turnover through 2 games here, and it was a fumble that fell right in your lap for David Reese to pick up against Tennessee. I think in the offseason, they really tried to put an emphasis on forcing more turnovers. And right now, Syracuse does not grade out well on PFF in terms of their coverage grade. That's actually their worst stat, is just how the defensive backs are guarding the wide receivers through 2 games. And I do feel like they're overall maybe not going to be a team that is going to get a ton of interceptions this year. But you didn't have Devin Grant in the last game. You've got guys like Deuce Chestnut back there. He had a couple opportunities in the last game to reel in an interception. It just hasn't worked out. That's something I would like to see in terms of what can you do against Colgate and kind of establish that the first 2 games were a little bit fluky in terms of the turnover stats. If you could actually pick up some turnovers, get to the quarterback more, sack the quarterback against Colgate, that would be much cleaner for me. I would like to see them make strides in that area. So that's definitely a good point. I'm always sort of interested in turnovers because that's a stat that really sways football games for sure. And you think back to 2018 was the year that Syracuse had a ton of turnovers and they had a 10-win team. And then 2019, they didn't get as many turnovers. And some of that is regression and some of it is luck when you do get turnovers or when you don't. But last year, they weren't a very turnover-heavy team, and they've tried to do everything they can this year to improve on that stat. So I'm definitely going to be monitoring that going forward. We'll hit our final timeout on the show. We will get to Michael and Manlius when we return. And if you have thoughts, you can call in as well, 315-437-7644. So Michael, hang on. We'll get you right after this break on Drive Time here on ESPN Radio and QSportsTalk.com.
Friday, the Orange are home.
Hey, what are you doing here? Yeah. Well, come in.
How's everybody doing?
I don't know. My chat's all messed up. I think I've got it on my laptop, but yeah, I don't know what I did. You can see them all here. Oh, yeah. That's YouTube too, right? Yeah. Look at that. Yeah, someone on the YouTube chat I forgot to mention earlier. I saw was asking about beers at Myers Creek tonight, but I am not going. Paulie doesn't have to put up with me tonight there. Got the Yankees show right after this. You can have beers with Paulie, though, right?
Yeah, I went home and did my hair.
Yeah, got ready for the show?
I have my fresh hair for the show.
It's been a good crowd at Myers Creek last couple weeks, so come on out if you can make it.
I'm not.
Paulie, everyone wants 4 to 6. I told him that's way above my pay grade. And just to listen, and then maybe we can.
Let's get through football.
Yeah. The show just started. People are never satisfied. Oh, he's got the gaffer's tape. He means business. Doc, yeah.
I don't know if that's better or ghetto.
Yeah, nice short stick D Mitty. He's supposed to be very good, Jen. That's a position we haven't recruited very well, so that's encouraging. Yeah, Paulie's not getting the expensive stuff, let's be honest. I recommend the Albuquerque turkey at Myers Creek for anyone that's going. I used to love going to Alamode, and I'd get the Albuquerque turkey there. That was right off campus. And then, unfortunately, that went the way of the dodo bird during COVID. I did go to Syracuse, Ryan, yeah. Graduated 2020, right in the pandemic, which really wasn't that bad. I felt worse for people that had to experience a couple years in college in a pandemic. I was kind of already done. I was down at the ACC tournament when the world stopped, men's basketball tournament, and working that. The Albuquerque turkey's just a sandwich there at Myers Creek. It's what you think it would be. Got Albuquerque sauce or something and avocado. It's good. Yes, lots of protein in that avocado. I also had the nachos last week, which were delicious as well. Those were not as good for you, but still very good. Yeah, fresh from Albuquerque, New Mexico. You can get the Dart beer too, right? That Dart Pilsner. Fran Brown, Shirley Temple's there. Oh, that'd be a good name for a drink. That'd be creative.
Watch your favorite ESPN Syracuse sports talk shows on QSportsTalk.com.
We're wrapping up the show today. We'll be back tomorrow. Friday game this week, so our final show of the week will be tomorrow. Get you our predictions for the Orange and what we want to see against Colgate and what should be an easy win on Friday. And then the schedule will be very, very tough the rest of the way for the Cuse. So one last kind of tune-up here before Clemson the following week. Duke after that, SMU on the road, and ACC play in earnest the rest of the way. Let's go back to the phone lines for a final thought tonight from our guy Michael in Manlius. Michael, thanks for calling in, and what's on your mind?
I'll be quick since you guys are almost off.
Oh, no, you're good.
I'll give you my dart word of the week.
All right.
The word for this week after the UConn win is relentless, because SU had missed a number of two-point conversions, and they kept at it and got one to work.
Yeah, they were relentless. We were talking about that with Adam Terry. They showcased the R and the T in dart for sure this week. And
kind of retro call the first week accountable, because coach apologizing to the fan base and the players redoubling their efforts. So that's my word of the week, Tim.
All right. I like it, Michael. Maybe we can make this a thing. Michael calling in with his word of the week every single week. It's only going to be one of 4 words, so if we want to stick with the dart theme. But I'm sure Michael will be calling in to the Fran Brown Show later on tonight as well. As he mentioned, he has called in the past and is one of the loyal callers to that program that will be out at Myers Creek in the Inner Harbor, new location that has had a great turnout the first couple of weeks out there. So be sure to drive on out to Myers Creek. You can spend the evening out there. And if you can't make it in person, you can listen to it on TK99 through the Syracuse Sports Network from Learfield. But we appreciate all of you for calling in. We appreciate Giovanni Heater for producing the show once again today. And we appreciate all of you in the chat as well, both on Q Sports Talk on the Twitch stream and on the YouTube page. I will be yapping about the Yankees some more, get into Yankees on Deck. If you're listening on the radio side of things, we'll get you ready for the Yankees and the Tigers, game 2 of their series. Very important series here in middle of September for the Yanks. That'll be on the other side, so we'll have your Yankees on deck. And then don't forget, Fran Brown Show, 7 to 8 p.m. at Myers Creek in the Inner Harbor. We'll talk to you on Drive Time tomorrow at 5 p.m. Thanks so much for listening.
This is Orange.